asked me to talk a little bit about customer service skills, and what I thought I'd do is look at some of the skills or characteristics of people who are good at customer service and kind of share those with you and talk a little bit about why those work and how to implement them. So to start off with, I think that these skills or characteristics are essential for everyone in your organization, including the boss, because the boss's customers, really the first line of customers, are their employees. I find in going around where I find problems with customer service, usually the management treats the employees badly, and that it translates out to the ultimate customer. So as a boss, apply these same skills that you're asking your employees to apply to your ultimate customers. So the first one is patience. Obviously, it's clear that when you're in customer service, all you get to hear are the bad things, the complaints. That's the nature of the job. But in most cases, people need time to tell you their story. And I find in a lot of cases, just telling the story solves the problem. And let me give you one that comes real close to home. Kathy and I were married about maybe 5-6 years. And my whole life I've been this problem solver person. You bring me the problem, I'll figure out an answer, we'll fix it. So she's telling me, complaining about something that's going on at work. And I said to her, well, why don't you do this? And I'll never forget the look on her face. She said to me, you know what? Just once, I'd like you to listen to me and not give me advice. And I thought, what just happened here? Exactly. But what I realized was what she really needed most of the time was just somebody to talk to bounce her frustration or anger or fear or whatever emotion she was feeling at that moment in time. I think it's worked pretty well with our situation because we just celebrated our 50th. So I think that probably was one of the keys that I learned early on. So patience is important for people who are in customer service. The second attribute is what I'll call attentiveness, and it's being really present at the moment that you're interfacing with that customer. Very often the customer really doesn't know what the problem is. They're telling you the symptoms, and a good customer service person is able to be there, be attentive enough to be able to read what they're really trying to explain to you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because this is a hard one to describe, but I see a lot of customer service people, they're there physically, but they're already coming up with the response. They're already coming up with the solution. And the second they do that, their listening capability goes down by about 50%. So the customer may have started to tell you this, problem A, and you're thinking about solution A, and the customer has moved to say the real problem is B. So when you give them solution A, you look like an idiot because you weren't listening. So being attentive, being present when the customer is explaining to you is really important. And then I think clear communication skills. And a lot of times we have a hard time articulating in a way that the customer understands it. Inside of our organization, we understand exactly what we're saying because we're using phrases that we all use every day. Sometimes we're using acronyms, okay? That doesn't translate real well to that customer outside. They don't understand. If you've ever dealt with the government is famous for having all these acronyms. They understand themselves. But when they're talking to civilians, it's like they're talking in Greek. So being clear with your communication. Part of that is when you say something, checking with your customer to see how they received it. What did they hear? Get them to give you some feedback, okay? So you ask them open-ended questions. Does that apply in your situation? Or how does that apply in your situation? To gauge whether or not they heard what you were trying to communicate. Big one here, I think you have to have a working knowledge of your product or your service. I have seen too many customer service people who really are complaint takers, because all they do is take the complaint and go to somebody else to find out what the answer is. I think you don't have to be an expert. If you're a plumber, for instance, you need to know the basics of plumbing. You don't necessarily need to know how to run glass pulling like they use in hospitals for the exotic gases that they use and things like that. But you do need to know the basics. You need to know, hot on the left and cold on the right, and something runs downhill. Okay, those kinds of, have enough that you have a working knowledge of it. The other thing is, when you're asked something that you don't know the answer to, don't bluff. You've got to be willing to say, I don't know how we would solve that, but I know somebody who's dealt with that before. Let me check with them. So there's nothing wrong with needing to go to somebody else to get the full information. When you give solutions, always use positive language. And I'll give you a really good example here, because I saw this in a magazine I was reading. Somebody asks for or tries to order a product. The negative response is, I can't get you that product until next month. It's back ordered and unavailable at this time. Now that sounds like a reasonable response, but it's coming at it from the negative viewpoint. A more positive response is, the product will be available next month. I can place the order for you right now and make sure that it's sent to you as soon as it reaches our warehouse. You've said exactly the same thing, but you've said it from a negative attitude or a positive attitude. Always choose the positive attitude. I also think that good customer service people need to be a bit of an actor, because none of us come to work cheery every day. We occasionally have a bad day. You can't, as a good customer service person, you can't exhibit that bad day. So you have to be able to put on that good face and be that pleasant person who's just as pleasant as when you're having a good day as when you're having a bad day. That's what the customer needs to see. Okay? Another one of the skills is time management. And this one's really subjective. It's knowing how much time you spend with each individual customer. There will be situations where you'll want to stay with that customer and hold their hand through the entire process. There are other times that it's necessary for you to cut your losses and move on. There are people in the world whose mission in life is never to be satisfied. Sometimes you got to let those people, you got to help them fulfill their mission. Let them go away unsatisfied, okay? And that's the most polite way I can say it. The next one, this ability to read customers, and this plays into a lot of what I talk about when I do the PAR stuff, the leadership development. When people are communicating to you, only a small percentage of their communication is in the words that they choose to use when they're talking to you. As a matter of fact, behavioral scientists will tell you that it's somewhere between 7 and 10% of the total communication is in words that we choose to use. Most of it is in the music that goes along with the words, and the music is our voice, our speed, our tone, our inflection, and our physical presence. Okay, we say a lot when we don't say anything, when we just sit there. So the ability to be aware of, and the phrase I use is pay more attention to how people say things than what they say. You'll hear the words that they use, and they will make a whole lot more sense if you pay attention to how they said it. Because I could say a word, if I just said, oh, really? That would kind of be apathetic. But if I said, oh, really? That would be happy, okay? Or I could say, yeah, really? That would be skeptical. So I've communicated three different kind of emotions, but I've said the same two words three different ways. Okay, so it's really important that you pay attention to how things are said. I think a good customer service person projects a calm presence. Somebody has got to be the stable ship in the storm. And one of the things, it's hard to do because right away, when someone's attacking or complaining, our natural inclination is either two. We got really two, fight or flight. One is to defend or one is to check out. Okay? Neither one of those are appropriate. You got to act like you've been there. You got to act like, I'm okay with this, I can deal with it. Remember that the person is complaining about the problem. They're not complaining about you. So if you cannot take what they're saying, even though they'll use the word you, if you cannot take that personal, you probably can stay calmer inside. I remember a story when I guess I was probably maybe 12, 13 years old. My dad took me to we lived up in Cleveland. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. And he took me to the preseason practice at Cleveland Browns. And at that time, God was the coach of the Cleveland Browns. You may have heard of him. Paul Brown was the coach. We in Cleveland thought he was God. So I'm sitting on the side of this hill. They practiced at Hiram College, and I'm sitting at the side of the hill, and no further away than you are is God. And he's talking to the rookies, and I can hear him saying this. He said, boys, this is the NFL. When you score a touchdown in this league, act like you've been there before. You know, and those words just stuck with he didn't say if you score. He was giving them the confidence that they were going to be successful. But he also wanted them to act like professionals when they did have that success. So I think that calming presence of a customer service rep really goes a long way to giving the customer confidence that what you're hearing is the right stuff. Okay, I think too. There's you got to be clear with your employees that are interfacing with customers about what the goal is. There's a lot of different ways. If the goal is to get out there on that sidewalk, there's a lot of different ways. We go out the front door. We could go out over here. We could go up on the top and go out in the balcony and down the stairs. So there's a lot of different strategies we could use. But you've got to make sure that your customer-facing people understand the goal of the business, okay? Because then you give them freedom to execute the strategy that's appropriate for this customer in this situation. You give them that flexibility. When you give them that flexibility, they take ownership. They have a stake. They're engaged rather than just an employee. They're engaged in the interaction. So, but if they don't understand what the goal is, then they start giving away stuff, okay? So you're asking them, I remember this when I first started out as a sales rep, I asked for some guidelines on expense accounts. And the guy I worked for was a genius. He said, spend it like it's your money. And it stuck with me. That was the way. If I was paying for this, would I do it? The answer is no, then I don't do it. the answer is yes, then I didn't have to check with somebody. So it's that kind of a goal orientation. The ability to handle surprises, you can be in customer service for 30 years, you're going to get a situation that you've never seen before and that you're going to need to take to somebody else. When you do that, as a manager or as an executive myself, what I wanted to know was 3 things: who, what, and how. So I expected my people to have that information when they brought it to me. It was off of those 3 pieces of information that I could make decisions. Too often people would come and one of those pieces are missing. You don't know what to do. You might as well be the first line customer service person if you don't have that information. So, and I think persuasion skills are important for a customer service person, because you may have a set of kind of general solutions that I use, but you need to present them in such a way that the customer feels that one's been customized to them. It may be the same solution that you use for customer A and customer B, but the way you present them to them is a little bit different. That looks like it's customized. People like that. And when you give them that feeling, and that's what persuasion is. People react in different ways. They have different attitudes. You persuade people by giving them a solution that's appropriate to their attitude. So someone who sees your solution as scary needs a different logic path than someone who sees your solution as interesting. The emotion that we have at any moment in the conversation actually controls how we logic, how we think. Okay? I saw this, my neighbor, and this was probably 5 years ago, had one of his shutters fall off, and it was on a 2nd-story window, and he put up a ladder, and I watched him from my house. I'm sitting there on Sunday morning, and he got on the bottom rung of the ladder, and he stopped. And I thought, what's he doing? That shutter's up there. And then he got to the next rung, and he stopped, and it was like 10 minutes he stood on the next rung. And it dawned on me, the guy's afraid of heights. Okay? So I got up and I went over and I put the thing up for him. But the different perspective. He's afraid of 2 feet off the ground. I don't really see a problem with that. 2 different perspectives need to solve the problem 2 different ways. And then I think there is tenacity. Staying with it until the problem is solved. Again, understanding those situations where you want to cut your losses, but staying with it. And the great question here for customer service people is, when a customer tells you the problem, don't go right to the solution. The next thing out of your mouth is, what else? Keep drilling down until they tell you that's all. Because there's nothing worse than, here comes customer A, and they tell you the problem, and you give them a solution, and then they say to you, yeah, but what about X? And you solve that, and they say, yeah, but what about Y? Okay? You want to get X, Y, and Z, and anything else out on the table, because in a lot of cases, one solution will bundle, one bundle, if you put them all together, it can be solved with one single solution. So having the tenacity to stay with it. And then I think the last one that I've got on this is, or there's 2 more, the ability to close. Customer service are not salespeople, except they are the best salespeople in the world, because the customer doesn't think of them as salespeople, and they don't think of themselves as salespeople. They think of themselves as helpers, and they have great credibility with the customer. So when a customer service person says, and in the future, I would recommend this, people buy that. So you've got to have that ability to draw it to a close, and if you can, provide a solution that prevents that from ever happening again. in the future, when you've got a problem with your well, rather than trying to fix it yourself, call us. We'll take care of it. We've got 24-hour service or whatever the service is that you're applying. And then the last one I've gotten, and this one's kind of general for anybody in business, is this willingness to learn. I think when you stop learning, your career is over. It's all downhill from there. There's people ask me, I'm older than dirt, yet I still go to seminars to learn because I still am engaged. I still want to know what's the latest and greatest. Most of it is garbage, or stuff that's been repackaged to make it look new and shiny. But I think it's just part of us, that willingness to continue to learn, to find out what's going on in the industry, in our particular industry, or in the marketplace. So those are the things that I wanted to mention today. Do you have any questions, any specific issues that you've encountered that I might be able to help you, or at least give you a suggestion of what you might try in the future?
I have a question I thought of. So, as you know, dealing in customer service, sometimes they'll start talking and they just keep going and going. It's like, how do you interrupt them and get them pared down to really what the problem is? Because sometimes they want to tell you their life story, and you're sitting there for 15 minutes while they're telling you a lot of information, but really the root of the problem, it's more like a 3-minute thing. Is there a way to kind of angle them to narrow it down to where it's really hitting more of the target problem to help resolve it?
I think you need to ask questions like, so how does that relate to the issue at hand? So help me understand that. How does that connect with X? And that'll draw them back onto the subject. I think early on in the transaction, if you can say to them, so the problem is X, correct? And you get that common goal. This is what we got to fix. Then when they start to veer off of the subject, and people are like that, people do, you can draw them back into saying something along those lines. I thought this was the issue we were dealing with. Can we try to stay with that? Okay. Because that's a very common thing. I think there's an intrinsic need in people to be listened to. And that may be another one that I didn't mention. I don't think that people need you to do what they want you to do. I think they really need you to listen to them so that they can tell you. That's 3/4 of what they really wanted. And by the way, I just thought of something else I was going to mention. There's a saying that the customer's always right. That is not true. The saying is the customer believes they're right. Okay? And you've got to help them see where they're driving down a path that says, I want you to refund all my money and give me your firstborn child as a solution. That's not going to happen. You've got to help them come back to reality of what is possible.
They can have a kid
Yeah. Maybe that wasn't a good solution. Knowing some of our firstborn children. So. What else? What other questions do you have, or situations that you face?
I have one more. This was a real life phone call that I got yesterday. I had a lady that was very upset about a situation and wanted me to give her advice how to handle something that was really a legal matter. And so I kept trying to refer her to attorneys, and she was very combative because she was convinced that we had somebody in this building that could answer the question for her. I hope that I handled the right way, but do you have any tips when after you give them, you really know what it is they need, and you give them that, and they're still not listening, and they're still going on when they're being combative like that? Is there a right way or wrong way, so when they hang up the phone, they don't feel like you brushed them off, but that you're still helpful, and they walked away feeling they had still a positive interaction from that?
Yeah, in most of those cases, remember that when people are communicating with you, there's 2 spheres of influence going on. One is the logical side, but the other is the emotional side. And in many cases, you're giving them a logical solution for an emotional problem. So one of the things you do, I do a lot of, is acknowledge the emotion that I'm seeing. So you say things like, gosh, that must be frustrating. Gee, that could be a real problem. Okay, and then the natural transition is to avoid that kind of frustration or problem in the future. I would go to an attorney and I can recommend X or I can recommend Y. Okay, but acknowledge the emotion first. When people keep going on and on like that, it's generally not because you haven't heard them. You heard the words, but you're not demonstrating that you're taking them seriously by acknowledging the emotion that they're feeling at that moment in time. That's why they keep. It's like when you don't get acknowledged, what's the first thing many of us do? We say it again, and we say it a little louder because it must have been a hearing deficiency, right? That's human nature, okay? And it's not that we weren't heard, it's that we weren't taken seriously based on the emotion that we're feeling at that moment in time. Yeah, it's empathy. And big difference here, folks. Do not equate empathy with sympathy. I mean, they're entirely different things. The best example I can give you is you're walking down a trail in the jungle and there's somebody in quicksand. Sympathy is jumping in with them. Empathy is saying, that looks like a problem. Sorry. That looks like a problem. Can I get a rope and get you out? Okay? A lot of people confuse that. Real empathy comes not from up here, but from here. You can't, I said in this thing about being a good actor, most people can't fake empathy. It comes across as fake, as unreal. You really got to care. And I think that's another thing that wasn't in the list that I gave you, but real good customer service people really do care. It's not just a job for them. They do really care about their customers. And really good bosses really do care about their employees.